All right, here we go. Part two of what I'm going to call my visual depictions here of the supernatural Bible changes. You don't really care for the term supernatural as much, but it's the only way I can really describe this to people that it really sinks in. Uh, how else are people going to really understand that the words, the printed words in the Bible, Bibles on their bookshelves at home, are changing? That to use the word supernatural. So I'm totally come up with a better word. It's just what I'm going to use. So verses that have been memorized, as long as I can remember, have all, at least half of them have changed. They're not in the Bible anymore. Do unto others as ye would have them do unto you. Those words, not in the Bible anymore. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Those words, not in the Bible anymore. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. Nope, that verse isn't in the Bible either. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Nope, sorry, that's not in the Bible. Not sure we memorized that from. Well, actually, I do remember all of those verses and words being in the Bible, but they're gone now. The verses have been altered, changed drastically in some cases. So I hope that this kind of imagery will help the concept sink in for some people, because when you read some of these verses, they're often well-known verses that have been, preached from pulpits for centuries. And when you hear some of these words, you should just hear that needle screech across the record in your mind. So this is a very well-known parable that Jesus taught in Matthew 9:17. It's a parable of the wineskins. That's that's what we know it as. It's comparing, the old teachings of the religious dogmatic system, being the old wine and the old wineskin. Okay, those two go together. But the new covenant with Jesus and the new teaching and the new vessel that people become when they become Christians, that's considered the new wine and the new wineskin. So if you mix the two together, like the new teaching into the old vessel, well, new wine as it ferments is going to burst an old wineskin because it can't expand. But a new wineskin will expand along with the wine as it ferments. Well, that makes sense. But look at the verse. It doesn't say wineskin. Neither do men put new wine into old bottles, else the bottles break, and the wine runneth out, and the bottles perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved. Wait, bottles? Are you serious? You see this imagery here. Bottles, that should come to mind. What else could you think of? What difference does it make if it's an old bottle or a new bottle? A bottle's a bottle. And wine is not meant to ferment in a bottle. It's meant to ferment in something that's going to expand or off gas. It has to accommodate the process that it's given to. Bottles is not the appropriate word to use here. It's also contemporary. They didn't have glass bottles back then. And just as I showed before in my last video, I have a Bible. It has commentary on the side. And the commentary uses the words that used to be in the Bible, but which are not there anymore. So this commentary talks about wineskins, old dried out wineskins, unfit for liquid, especially for wine, to ferment, because the violence of the fermentation would burst them. Okay, why are you talking about wineskins in the commentary here? The verse says bottles. So my theory is, at one point, this exact Bible right here once said wineskins, and the commentary reflected that. It matched perfectly to explain the verse because they both were talking about wineskins. Now, for lack of better words, a supernatural change has occurred to the words in the Bible. Now it says bottles. All right, how about this? What kind of imagery comes to mind when Jesus talks about the diminutive little creatures and plants in the kingdom that he often would compare people to? I always remember it being sparrows. Sparrows. Consider the sparrows. Luke 12:24. This affects all versions of the Bible, not just the King James. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn, and God feedeth them. How much more are ye better than the fowls? No, it wasn't ravens. It was sparrows. I like ravens. They're cool. They're intelligent, but they're not the diminutive little creature that's apt for this, as an apt metaphor for this comparison that Jesus is making. And look at this. People are quoting this verse next to a sparrow. But the verse says, consider the ravens. This is crazy. Did they not see or read the actual verse before they decided to add this graphic depiction? It's not just one. There are many of these. Consider the sparrows is what it was. Now it's consider the ravens. On top of that, sparrows.
Ravens are skilled food cachers. These intelligent birds have a remarkable behavior of storing their food for later consumption. They hide surplus food in various locations, creating caches that they can revisit when food is scarce. This caching behavior demonstrates their exceptional problem-solving abilities and resourcefulness in the wild. Ravens truly exemplify nature's ingenuity.
So once again, ravens are not useful in this comparison because they actually do store food for later. This metaphor doesn't work anymore. All right, how about this? People talk a lot about Isaiah 11:6, the lion lying down with the lamb, but that verse continues to present more imagery for the reader to consider about the peaceful kingdom that's coming. And it talks about a small child playing around with a poisonous snake and not having to worry about being bitten. So what are we looking at here? Okay, we see the child, the snake, and what the heck is that on the right? Well, it's in the Bible now, and if you have never heard of it, you're not alone. Most people have not heard of this creature, let alone being in a familiar Bible verse that many pastors quote on Sunday morning. This is called a cockatrice. Have you ever heard of a cockatrice before? Half chicken, bat, lizard, snake thing? Well, this is what the verse says now. And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den? That second part, I think, was just totally added. I mean, there was a mention of, putting the child putting the hand on the hole of the adder or the viper. No cockatrice was ever mentioned before. I've never heard of this thing until it just showed up in the Bible one day. And a lot of other people are pointing this out, like, yeah, this is very unfamiliar. Never heard of this before. I think this is the Mandela effect. Yeah, supernatural Bible change. Cockatrice. More bottles. Judges 4:19, and he saith unto her, give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. Bottle of milk. Yeah. And what's really weird is when you compare Bible versions for this verse, it gets even more weird. What were they using back then? I'm familiar with like jars, vessels, cups. Things were familiar from that time period that people used. How about this? She opened a skin of milk. She gave him some milk from a leather bag. New Living Translation, English Standard, a skin of milk. All these translations. A container of milk, a bottle of milk, a jug of milk in the New King James, a leather bottle of milk in the NASB. What? This is just very unfamiliar to me. Moving on. This term is now repeated throughout the Bible 8 times. Have you ever heard of this before? Would you know what anyone was talking about if they said they sat at meat? Sat at meat. It's a lot of sitting at meat now these days in the King James Bible. Mark 2:15. And it came to pass that as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples. Sat at meat. Publicans? What the heck is a publican? I've never heard of that before. This is more strange language. The words used to be, to sit down or even recline. I remember Jesus reclining at the table with the disciples. Now it's sat at meat. And publicans, do you even know what that is? I know I've heard of tax collectors and sinners, but not publicans. It used to be tax collector, not publican. There's a lot more of these examples of sitting at meat. As he sat at meat. Jesus sat at meat. As he sat at meat. Sat at meat. Very strange. Never heard of this. And yeah, just read these verses and tell me that needle doesn't go screeching across the record when the words are read out loud and the visual imagery comes to your mind. What are you supposed to think? John 12:24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall to the ground and die. Wait, what? A corn of wheat? What the heck is a corn of wheat? What am I supposed to picture in my head here? It used to be kernel or grain of wheat, not corn. They didn't have corn in the Bible. What's that word doing in there? And corn, it's multiplied, and the context in which it's used is bananas. How can people read this and not think that, hey, something's going on here? This isn't right. Isaiah 62:8. Surely I will no more give thy corn to be meat for thine enemies. Corn to be meat? Yeah, well, look at that. Is that what that means? Corn? Did Jesus or somebody in the Bible turn corn into meat? Just like turning water into wine? I don't know. What am I supposed to imagine here? Corn to be meat. Used to be grain to be food. Grain to be food for my enemies. Not corn to be meat. How can corn be meat? Crazy. John 10:23. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Porch. What do you do next? Pull up a rocking chair? Pour a nice tall glass of iced tea? Sit for a spell? Enjoy the view? Porch. Yeah, porch. Used to be vestibule. Not porch. And that word is now multiplied many times in the Bible. Acts. And they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. Porch? Porch. And this next one. What am I supposed to think here? What kind of mental imagery is going to come to mind when I read this verse? And then he made a porch for the throne, where he might judge, even the porch of judgment. The porch of judgment. 1 Kings 7:7. The porch of judgment. There you have it. Yeah, this is an addition. It's a new word. Porch. It's not supposed to be there. Now it is. Once again, we're talking about the King James Bible. It's most heavily affected by the Mandela effect, supernatural Bible change, whatever you want to call it. More words are changing in this Bible than any other version, which is typically a version that does not change, doesn't get updated. It's been the same for hundreds of years. Now it's changing. It's almost unreadable these days because yeah. All right. Hebrews 11:34. Does this kind of imagery ever come to mind when you've read verses in the Bible? Turn to flight the armies of the aliens. Armies of the aliens. I know alien can mean foreigner. I get that, but I've never read that word before in the Bible before. There's certain mental imagery might come to mind if I did. I'm like, that's weird. Aliens? And even when I was younger, I remember aliens being in the news, and someone had to explain to me, because I thought it was extraterrestrials. They say, no, that's not that kind of alien. Well, I never had to ask that question when reading the Bible. Now I do. Aliens are in the Bible. And there's a lot of aliens. Turn to houses to aliens. Turn to flight the armies of the aliens. Christ being aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel? What? Aliens. And another word is alienated. Now, I saw the word aliens appear, and there was no alienated at that time. I was looking for all these kind of word variants, and I looked for this. It wasn't there a few years ago. Now, alienated is showing up in the Bible. Alienated was alienated from her mind. This term, my mind was alienated from her sister. Sometimes alienated, being alienated. Thy mind is alienated. What? Thy mind is alienated. Ezekiel 23. Her mind was alienated. This language is just so weird. Moving on. Job. This book is crazy. There's so many verses that have changed in this book. Just read Job out of the King James Version. And if you're not just taking pause every other verse at like what's being written and what you're supposed to imagine, you wouldn't be alone, because a lot of people might be thinking that these days. This book is changing. So what do I have pictured here? Well, there's Job sitting in the dirt, covered with sores. He lost everything. His friends there on the right, kind of chastising him. What did you do wrong? Get on God's bad side. Job 16:14. He breaketh me with breach upon breach. He runneth upon me like a giant. Once again, I put this one in there just because I think it's new. I've been reading Job and I don't remember seeing this before. I'm looking for that mental imagery when I read a verse, and this mental imagery hasn't come to mind until more recently. I'm like, wait, what? Runneth upon me like a giant. That's new. And more of these weird creatures, cockatrices, unicorns, satyrs. Do you even know what a satyr is? I didn't know what they were until I read this verse. Isaiah 24:14. The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. Yeah, it's like called a goat demon or something. Okay, satyrs in the Bible now. What'll be next? Yeah, the word used to be wild goat, which would make more sense. I don't think this creature actually exists in real life. Why are they writing about it? And one of these verses that are not just weird when you read them out of the King James, but you start comparing them to other versions, and they're even more weird. So Isaiah 8:19. Once again, Isaiah is another book that's changing wildly. Just read the book of Isaiah. If you're not scratching your head going, what is going on here? I'd say, yeah. Okay, so, and when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and mutter. Wizards that peep and mutter? Are wizards known to peep and mutter? Okay, that's weird. Now let's look at some other translations. Here's the Bible translation version. The spiritists who chirp and mutter. Chirp, chirp. Wizards that chirp and mutter. Fortune tellers who make soft chirping sounds as they ask the spirits of the dead. What? Wizards that chirp and mutter. This is weird. Consult mediums and spirits who whisper and mutter. Seek oracles at the pits who use to conjure up underworld spirits from the magicians who chirp and mutter. Consult with spirits of the dead and familiar spirits who chirp and who mutter. This is weird. Now, look at this. International Standard Version. Ask the mediums your questions and quiz the spiritists who chirp and mutter. Quiz? Quiz. Yeah, sure. Why not? Quiz. Quiz the spiritists who chirp and mutter. What? This is crazy. How about this? The Catholic versions. I've noticed some really weird verses in these Catholic Bible versions, the Dewey Rhymes and the Catholic Public Domain version. Seek of pythons and of diviners, who mutter in their enchantments. Pythons? That's what else can you think of? Especially when you read this next version here. Catholic Public Domain version. Seek from seers and diviners, they who hiss in their incantations. So, is there some kind of a snake association going on here? Pythons? Hiss? And hiss has been multiplied in the Bible. I don't think that word ever existed in any Bible that I'm familiar with, but now the word hiss is all over the place. People hissing, the Lord hissing. So I looked this up, and Python is actually like a Greek word for a spirit that, possesses somebody to do some kind of a fortune telling or, predictions of the future. But what else am I supposed to think of here when you read these two versions of the same verse? Pythons and hiss. Just sounds like a snake. I don't know. Python. Pythonic. It's another word that's in the Bible. Pythonic. Hiss. Yep. A lot of hissing going on in the Bible now. Isaiah 7:18. So, since we're looking at the King James mostly, the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of the river of Egypt. Hiss? The Lord will hiss? What do other Bible translations say? The Lord will whistle for the flies. What? Flies from the Nile. The New Living Translation says the Lord will whistle for the armies of southern Egypt. You got some explaining to do here, because how can you make that word association translate, either as flies or as armies of southern Egypt? This is weird. Really weird. Hiss, whistle? That's what the Lord does? Okay. I don't know what you think about this, but more of this mental imagery that I never had to consider before, because these kind of words weren't in the Bible. I didn't have to think about this kind of stuff because it wasn't there. The words are much easier to understand, but the Bible's changing. Now I realize that for the most part I'm preaching to the choir here. Most people who find these videos and have gotten this far, already see that the Mandela effect is a real thing, and the Bible's being changed. But for any of those out there who are on the fence about this, I'd hope you'd take a look at this and, post any remarks. Get a little discussion going on, because I'd like to know what's going on as much as anybody else. And hey, if it's just me taking things out of context and misinterpreting a bunch of old text, set me straight. Feel free to mention anything in the comments. Thanks.